Okay, we're now recording. Also, if you wanted to put in the chat where it is that you're located, we would love to know. I am sitting here today in Arroyo Grande, California, which is also my hometown. Oklahoma City, Memphis, Tennessee, South Shore, Massachusetts, Savannah, Tennessee. Wow, lots of Tennessee folks. All right. New York, Oklahoma, Indiana, New Hampshire. Awesome. Welcome. We're so glad you're here. So I'd like to turn it over to Carrie. She's the community facilitator for the Southeast at ACES Connection. Go ahead, Carrie.
Thank you, Allison. It's good to see you, and I'm glad that you're inside and not playing with the bobcat outside your door. Allison has a bobcat that lives in her neighborhood. So this is a real treat for me to have a couple of my favorite humans in the world together to talk about how they are building communities and the urgency that we are feeling right now in the face of COVID-19. Black Lives Matter protestations, so many pressures and opportunities for us right this minute. My two friends, Becky Haas and Danette Glass, are both incredible community builders. They go about it in slightly different ways, but they both feel the urgency and are compelled to do this work. And I'm going to let them tell you just a little bit more about themselves, but I will say that one thing that I love is that we all met at the same time. Danette and Becky and I met each other at the same time at a really historic event in Johnson City, Tennessee, where Becky is from, that was hosted by SAMHSA. And I caught then the passion of these two women who are bent to help prevent childhood trauma and help heal childhood trauma and help their communities. And Danette Glass has a lot of communities. Let me tell you what, this woman is in the road more than anybody I have ever known. If she got sky miles for the miles that she drives, she could go around the world. And I know Becky travels a lot too, taking this message out. But Danette seems to go from almost like a freedom rider circuit preacher to go from community to community to community to spread the word about ACEs science. And she takes her passion with her. So it's just a real pleasure to have the three of us together, almost 2 years since we met in September of 2018 at an incredible conference that Becky hosted that had people from 20 states, wonderful speakers from SAMHSA and from East Tennessee State University and from throughout the country, actually, and gave us all a chance to meet and learn how we can lift each other up in this quest to help defeat toxic childhood stress. So Danette, tell us a little bit about yourself, and we'll keep these little intros quick, but tell us about yourself and where your passion for ACEs science came from.
Well, thanks so much, Carrie. I am excited about being here with you and with Becky. And you talk about two of my most favorite people. I guess why we say each other's favorite, because we both have passions. We all have passions to prevent adverse childhood experiences and adverse community experiences. I am a trauma survivor from an upper middle class, African-American yet interracial household. My parents were, I'm third generation college educated. My grandparents attended college back in the early 1900s. So when we think of ACEs, sometimes we think about it being in impoverished settings, and we don't think about as much that it impacts not only all walks of life, but all races and so forth. So my passion actually stems from the fact that I was exposed to trauma as a child in many capacities. My ACE score is a 6. But with that, my parents provided some wonderful opportunities to allow me to have a balance And so I was able to thrive, not just survive. And this is my life's work. This is my calling. And I am excited about being here with you all today. Thank you, Carrie.
You're so welcome, Danette. And Becky, tell us give us a little background on your history with ACEs.
Okay, thank you, Carrie, and it's great to be here today. And I love the ACEs community. They always make me feel like a family reunion because if many of you that are doing this work in your community, you get a lot of wrinkled up faces, what? And when we're all together, we get it, you know? And so my learning about trauma-informed care, I've been most all my career has been in education, worked in Christian education many years, a lot of volunteer nonprofit, and I was working at the Johnson City Police Department with an $800,000 crime reduction grant in 2012 to reduce drug-related and violent crime in Johnson City. And in 2014, our chief asked me to write a grant for a family justice center. Domestic violence is very high in the state of Tennessee, and California developed a model that's now recognized as best practice. And it was in the journey with the Family Justice Center that I first heard about trauma-informed care. And I honestly felt like if I heard about it, I was the last one catching the train. When SAMHSA came in 2018 and said that we had done more to fulfill their 2014 concept paper than any town they knew of, I was shocked. I'm the lady in yoga pants in Walmart. And, you know, this was shocking to me. But maybe as a mother and a grandmother working at the police department and working to reduce recidivism, spending time in the jails, hearing these trauma survivor stories, and then learning about ACEs, I realized that this was not something that was being brought in the conversation to solve these problems. And so as Carrie said, and you could tell in Danette's voice, I passionately went after telling and educating my town. And so in 2018, I reached back out to SAMHSA. They provided me with a draft course. And so I was running 19 programs of 35 agencies at the police department. This wasn't in my job description. I'd come in at 6 in the morning to keep all my programs going so I'd have time to help train. And in 3 years, we trained almost 4,000 professionals and reached out to SAMHSA and said, hey, could we have a webinar with all the people that did this? And they're like, we don't know of anybody that retrained police, hospitals, libraries. So we had the forum where I met Carrie and Danette. So that's a little bit of my background. Then I was moved to healthcare right after that national model SAMHSA event. I was offered a role in healthcare where I was for the last 18 months. And back in April of this year, due to the demand, even in COVID, to do coaching and consulting, I launched out and just happy to be here today. You're muted, Carrie.
Thank you so much. I'm mute because I have my small dog here and he gets a little feisty sometimes. So just didn't want anybody who has a dog sensitivity to hear him growl a bark.
We've been getting to know everyone's dogs since the pandemic, you know? Now it's just live Zoom calls with people's dogs. This is just life now.
And he had puppy ACEs, so he checks out. Yes, life at the Texaco station. But Danette, tell me, how did it change your life when you found out about ACEs science? I mean, was it a revelatory moment, or?
Well, actually, it was confirmation. That was the beautiful part. I didn't share with you, I was in corporate America for a couple of decades and made a decision after having some great touchdowns and hotel investments that I really wanted to do something that would impact others' lives. And so I was always on board of directors and working in community agencies, you know, through my philanthropic and corporate endeavors. But I decided that I was going to leave. And my husband said, go and volunteer and play with those children. So he gave me an out. He said, you go do it for a year. And then, you know, I'll take care of everything. And then after a year, you can go back to work. So long story short, After the year, I never returned to corporate America. And that was in 1998. So it's been a little while. Because I am a trauma survivor, I understood that we needed to handle young people a little different that had been exposed to trauma. And so my challenge was that I would talk a lot. And I was talking so that I would not tell what was going on in the household or things that I had experienced. And so I always will not refrain from unnecessary talking on the report card. Do you all remember that on the report card? I always had that on mine. So I would not refrain. Now, mind you, my mother was an elementary and middle school principal. So she did not understand that the trauma that I was exposed to in the household, and I'm all right to share this. My mother and father loved each other very much and loved me very much, but it was a volatile household. My father drank heavily. We believe that it stemmed from him being in World War II, being a Black man returning to America and not having the rights and privileges. A very handsome man he was. And he had to endure some things in society that we believe he self-medicated to just deal with it. But the drinking did not help my mother, who was very influential in the community and having to go to work. My mother became a principal in 1961. And you can imagine a Black woman being a principal in North Carolina in 1961. But she always had to prove herself. You know, we were still doing with Jim Crow. It was still segregation. And with my dad keeping her up till 4 o'clock in the morning, and then she having to go to work at 6:30 was a problem. And so normally right around that 3 o'clock time frame, I would hear doors slamming, furniture breaking, and all kinds of stuff. And so I realized that children exposed to that type of environment needed to have a little more loving kindness, Carrie. And so ACEs, the study of ACEs, just basically gave me some more understanding of what we had already realized just from lived experiences. So I wouldn't say necessarily revelatory. I think it was more confirmation, and I was happy to see that it had been done.
Thanks. And then Becky, both of you have had a passion for youth, I know. But for you, how did it, I mean, it totally recalibrated, reconfigured your career, right?
Yeah. I mean, when I heard about it, actually the chief of police that I served at that time, when he saw it taken off, he really felt I should step away. And then later he apologized. I appreciate his kind heart when we had 2 governors' wives come and learn about it, and people from other states. But he didn't at first connect the dots. And I'd say probably many people on this call today, whatever role you play in your community advocacy, you've probably had barriers the same. But like Carrie said, it of all the things that I've been an educator of in my career, I trained police for many years on car seat safety. Was a lead instructor and trained officers in 33 counties of Tennessee on car seats and such. But I almost felt like this was the cure for cancer. And if I didn't come back and tell my town, I'd be held responsible. And I think working here inside the prison a lot, the prison programs, our prisons here are overcrowded. We have one prison that was built 10 years ago to hold 300. There's 600 sleep there a night. The healthcare system that I worked for 18 months, we cover rural Appalachia, 11 counties, Southwest Virginia, 10 in Northeast Tennessee. We're really the hotbed of rural Appalachia, and we deliver more drug addicted babies to mothers of addiction than almost any other area in the nation. A typical county will deliver 9 per 1,000, and we have one county that's 100 of 1,000 babies are born to an addicted mother. And then when I saw that over 20 years, prison population grew by 500% in America, and it wasn't reducing these things. And to me, ACEs brought about the perfect upstream approach. In 2014, when I read the Nashville, Tennessee newspaper, legislators said we could lose the next generation to the opioid epidemic. I'm getting ready to have grandchildren, and I just don't flip to the scores of the Braves game. I just thought, wait a minute, this can't happen. And I think that's been some of what's happened here in Johnson City, is we've really taken this message as if the building is on fire, and if I can't get to that floor to save the children, then I'll train 40 other people, and by golly, someone will get in there, and be able to train them or to touch that life. So to your point, yes, this impacted me, and now, it's my full-time career.
Right. And, we are at such an incredible moment in American history. It's astounding to me. I want to ask the audience, those of you who are community managers, would you raise your hands just so I get an idea of how many people are in ACEs communities? Wow. Okay. Well, we've got some people who can get put into some communities, which will be great. But, it's become increasingly apparent to most people in the world, in our world anyway, that ACEs really are the nexus of poverty, racism, inequity, health inequities. We can look at it and we can say that almost every problem in society has its roots in toxic childhood stress. Danette, I love that you brought up the fact that the gentle approach with some 30,000 kids that Danette Glass has worked with through the years was what worked, because we know punishment is not the way, that acceptance and empathy really are the ways. But tell me, at this nexus that we're at, about your personal sense of urgency, Danette, to get this information into I know you're working in about 14 different communities throughout Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, getting ready to be in Alabama and Birmingham. I mean, you're in Washington, D.C., you are rocking and rolling, and you stay in the road. What's this urgency with you to get this work done?
Well, it's critical that we get it done, because, we don't want to have hurting people hurt people. And also we want people to be able to live a life that is bountiful and to realize their full potential. There's a lot of things that we are troubled with in society today. You named a few of them. But parenting, I saw someone put in the chat about parenting. If your parents model poor parenting skills in front of you, the likelihood of your modeling great parenting skills is slim. But if you have been exposed to kind people who genuinely care about you and they want the best for you, how great can that be in changing the life of a child? And then that child with his peers, when the peers see that he's happy and prospering, that the peers say, I'd like to have a piece of that happiness too. So how can we do that? Now, one of the things when you mentioned, Carrie, about the racism and the social unrest that we're experiencing, that's been going on forever. And that we've had some changes in tides and things of that nature. But I still believe that the heart of man, above all things, can get us to the point that we can love one another. I just believe that. And so I believe that when we model, those of us that are passionate about this work, and it's not just about children, it's about adults too, because, just like he said, we're working with parents. We need to work with everyone that touches the life of a child, everyone. And we need to work, and there are some parents and adults that had some horrific experiences and they're still wounded right now. We have to work with them as well. And then they can help with the others. So I don't know if I answered your question in a roundabout way. One of the things that I was interested in pulling from this discussion is to hear what the needs were. And I don't know if you're going to ask that question, because what I found is we started with 7 kids. The 7 went to 150. 150 went to 750. 750 went to 1,200. And then we started serving thousands annually. We did not advertise. These young people told other young people, and they came to us because they said, hey, these people care about us. They're going to feed us. They listen to us. They're not coming with a program that's already been cut and asking us to be a part of it. They're letting us design programs. And as a result of that, now we have young people that have their PhDs. They're returning the service. We have young people that are at the Pentagon. We have young people on Capitol Hill. We can do this. All we have to do is demonstrate loving kindness. That's all we have to do.
Well, and Danette, I mean, I will never forget hearing you tell a story one time about having a busload full of children. And, you know, we call them now in this day positive childhood experiences. And how important it is for children to have those, because a person who has ACEs but doesn't have any positive childhood experiences is actually going to be more affected than a person with no ACEs and no positive childhood experiences. And that's why the emphasis on adults is so important, because any one of us at any time could be a hero to a child. But that, I remember hearing that you had this busload full of kids and there was some problem with the payment, and you paid for that bus yourself so that those kids would not have to get off that bus and be disappointed about not getting to take a field trip that was going to expose them to some culture and some different ways of living. So, you know, I know, Becky, you've done it too. I mean, we pull out all the stops when it comes to wanting to give good things to children. And so I just want to thank you for that, Becky. I know that the fact that Black women are dying at 2 to 3 times the rate of white women in childbirth, and their babies too, is a huge driver for you. And would love to hear you say some about that as a driving force for you as well.
Now you mean Danette? I mean, that's...
No, I meant Danette. I'm sorry, Becky. I'm coming right back to you. Pardon me.
Yeah. So and Carrie, you know, thank you for bringing that up about the bus situation. Definitely, my mom and dad helped with a lot of that. But CT Vivian was the person that really guided me through that process. We expose young people to a better way of life. Funny you call it a better normal, because that was what we were doing, exposing them to a better normal, taking them out of some horrific situations and giving them hope and an understanding that they did not have to live the way they saw those in their community and in their household living. But in reference to maternal mortality in the Black community, when we started looking at trauma, we brought together a brain trust. Carrie mentioned about us working in different states. So several years ago, my mother was given a death sentence by the doctor, but not by God. And we decided that we were going to hit the road and to just try to find out what was going on out here that we could maybe make a difference. And so we did. And we traveled to several states and conducted focus groups and interviews of everyone from people that were still in prison, gang members, educators, lawyers, doctors, you name it. We talked to everyone and from all spectrums of life. In doing so, we pulled together a needs assessment to determine what the cries were in the community. At that time, I did not realize how many Black women were dying as a result of childbirth, not during childbirth, but postpartum. Postpartum indicating that after their discharge from the hospital, many of them were discharged with preeclampsia, high blood pressure, when they should have stayed in the hospital. Now in the last 2 months, I'm a consultant for several public health agencies. In the last 2 months, we've had women die whose blood pressure was 190 over 150, discharged from the hospital. They tried to tell the doctor that they weren't feeling well, went home and fell out. So when we look at Black maternal mortality, what we're having to look at is implicit bias of physicians, a lack of cultural competence, and understanding that because women are Black, they're supposed to have a higher tolerance for pain, and so forth. And we had to debunk the myth that it was only impoverished Black women, because that's what the state of Georgia was trying to say through their maternal mortality review committee findings. But we had to debunk that because some of the women that died had PhDs and were earning 6 figures. And so the Center for Disease Control and Prevention said that racism was a factor in that. Now, and the only reason I'm mentioning this is when we started looking at trauma, we didn't just look at the ACEs, the 10 on the Kaiser CDC scale. We recognized in the Black community, there were about 15 additional ACE factors, adverse childhood or adverse community factors, that impacted trauma, toxic stress, and just social determinants of health. And so we started looking at those factors, and hopefully we'll be able to publish that soon. We're still doing research in that regard. But Carrie, in reference to maternal mortality, it causes a challenge in a household, in a family, when the mother dies unexpectedly at childbirth. That in itself is traumatic for any child that is left behind. So that's just one thing, but we have, as I stated, several other areas that we're considering.
Right. And Becky, for you, I mean, there is such a stigma around people who are on drugs, and the opioid crisis, some of these people came by these drugs honestly through surgeries or injuries, and then ended up addicted. And the cultural bias towards addicts. But there are people who, just as Danette said, PhDs, doctors themselves, and you're taking this into hospitals and sharing this with everyone in a hospital, from the surgeons to the house cleaning staff to the nutritionists to the front desk people. Did you find, are people really surprised by the science? And did you get a sense that as they look at people coming into the hospital for drug-related whatevers, that maybe they would have a little bit more empathy and a little bit more compassion, because there, but by the grace of God, go most of us.
Exactly. Well, in 5 years, this just educate, collaborate. I co-authored a toolkit in 2019 that's been published in a journal of Johns Hopkins now, and also in Annals of Behavioral Health. By just taking that simple approach and getting the word out about childhood adversity, this last September, our headlines of our local newspaper was about ACEs. I sent it to Jane Stevens, and she said, though it's been a lot in the newspapers, she wasn't aware ever of a headlines. And just back in March of this year, the health system that I worked for gave a gift of about, I think it was 1.5 million over 5 years to East Tennessee State University. And now we've launched the Strong Brain Institute. So though I'm no longer a staff member at Ballad Health, ETSU's asked me to also be a consultant. But to Danette, the way as she's learning with working with the youth and then working with the mothers and child. When I worked at the police department, one of the things I was supposed to do with that crime reduction grant was reduce recidivism. And so the judges, and working with judges and corrections, they asked the perimeters would be high risk, high need felony offenders with addictions. And I sat in groups for I oversaw that program for 4 years, and at the end of it, the Tennessee Department of Corrections acquired it from us, and now it's a state model, which was pretty cool. But I heard in groups a woman tell one day how that her youngest memory of her mother was a heroin addict, that when she was a little girl, that her mother would get very sick when she would shoot up, and her job was to pull her mother out of the toilet while she's vomiting, while her older sister would be screaming across the house, let her drown, let her drown. And this girl went on to tell that one time when she was 8, her older sister 10, they had a brand new baby sister, 4 weeks old. The mother disappeared for a few weeks in search of drugs, and these little girls were alone for 2 weeks. And I'm thinking, how does an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old take care of a 4-week-old? And so the little girls used all the formula, and then when it ran out, she told how that they melted ice cream thinking there's milk and ice cream, and then the baby got sick and they called for the grandpa. And I said to her that day, I said, now remember, I work at the police department. Her charges were manufacturing meth, very serious, but I'm hearing over and over and over and over without exception these trauma backgrounds. And I said to her that day with tears in my eyes, I said, I'm so sorry that is your story. You know, that part of your story was not your fault. And I said, this program's a year, you're going to be here. It's no cost to you. It's a part of your probation. And there's counseling here. And someone needs to sit with you in counseling and help you to reconcile how that, you know, that was a part of your beginning. And the next time I was over there, she handed me a little note, and I carried it home, and I remembered it that night and pulled it out of my pocket. And she said, thank you, Miss Becky, for treating me like a person. And when the state acquired that program, her picture was on the front page of our newspaper with her sentencing judge. And that to me, so it showed me that trauma is the gateway drug, and that we should have a war on trauma instead of, you know, the war on drugs. And so then when I moved to healthcare, it was worse because of the opioid epidemic. And so to Danette's point, I went running hard and fast, put 35,000 miles on my car in 1 year, just covering the territory of Ballard. We have 50 school districts. I trained 8 entire school districts working with the superintendent down. I realized that we had to touch every point that touched these families. We trained our libraries. We have social workers in a lot of our libraries now, because they know at night when they cut the light off that there's a little gal in the back that's a domestic violence survivor, and she's waiting there. It's the last safe place she can go till it's time to go home. And so anyway, to Danette's point, I realized that many of the same agencies share the same service, share the same clients or consumers. And so we all need to be able to understand a trauma lens. So yes, it's with urgency. And I just feel it's so important that every type of professional sector understand
where we are with this. And,
yeah.
and both of you, this last couple of weeks has been pretty amazing. Having lost Representative John Lewis from Atlanta, and Danette, I know you met him along the way, but he talked sometimes about a concept that he loved, that Martin Luther King had put forth, but it's biblical in nature, I'm sure, is the beloved community. And how would you compare a beloved community to being trauma informed? Is that just another way of saying it? What does trauma informed really mean to y'all? Danette, what does it truly mean to you when you go out and you're doing this work to help schools and businesses and systems, to get a system to become trauma informed? I mean, that's where we've got to do the work, is to change the systems.
So my approach is probably, I guess it would be unorthodox. I would, if we were all together, I would ask everybody on here, why is ACEs and trauma important to you? That would be the first thing. Because some people want to do this work for some reason, and others want to do it for another reason. So that would be the first thing that I would ask. Because really, when you're looking at building a beloved community, you want people that are passionate about the work. They know that they are called to do the work, whether they receive a dime or a thank you. Because sometimes you don't get either. Sometimes you're giving out the thousands of dollars and people are cursing you out. And you still got to stand there and smile, hold their hands, cry with them, and get through it. And it's not only about the ones that we serve, it's about the gatekeepers in government and community-based organizations that really don't want the work to go forward because they think that you're putting them out of business. If everyone is healed, if everyone's good, then they won't have a job anymore. And that's really what's going on right now. I was exposed to that. Congressman Lewis and C.T. Vivian, great men of God, great men of America, went through a lot of battles and everything. And I will never forget, I was actually in Congressman Lewis's presence on a number of occasions. And I'm, all I can say is this. Being in Georgia has been one of the blessings. I never wanted to move to Georgia, and indulge me for 1 second. I never wanted to move to Georgia. I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina, and I went to Duke University and then went to Cornell University. And Washington, D.C. is where I was really happy and wanted to stay. But my former spouse was with IBM, and IBM moved us around a million places, and Atlanta was one of the spots. Atlanta was good for me, though, because I was able to be exposed to a level of people that were passionate about the work, that did not mind rolling up their sleeves and getting the job done. And I'm speaking of Black and white. I have friends that are in North Fulton, and I'm telling you, these are some of the most passionate women that I've ever met in my life. They, beyond a doubt, single-handedly have moved and shaped the landscape in Georgia. And these are not Black women, but they are some of the most phenomenal women that I've ever met. And that's what it takes. It takes passion. So having a beloved community in word is one thing. And Carrie, you know this, you're one of the most passionate people about ACEs. You can't have a conversation with Carrie without ACEs coming out of her mouth, or ACEs connection, or starting a community, or getting something done. She lives it. And that's what we need. We need people that live it. Becky is the same way. Did you hear her rattling off all the statistics? She has done the research. She has lived it. She knows what's necessary. And the beauty of this is, when we look at people and children as just that, not labeling them, not saying, oh, she has a 5A score, she's going to be a troublemaker, not just loving people, having loving kindness to them. And Carrie, I think that's what the beloved community is all about. I know we're getting close to time, about 20 minutes out. I really would like to hear at some point from people and find out, why did they decide to join this A Better Normal? What was it that they wanted to get from this session? I'm really interested in that. Why is trauma-informed care important to you? Maybe we can come together like Becky and I have. Becky and I have come together and hosted a symposium and doing some other things. Carrie and I have come together. She talked about me being in several states, but I want to thank you, Carrie. You've gone with me to several states to take ACEs Connection so that people are aware of the repository and all of the great information that you have. But that's really what I would like to know. What is it that people want to get from this session, and why are they involved with trauma-informed care?
I think while folks are typing you can type maybe like a short version of your answer, and then I'll call on you. I'm going to first call on Adrian, who had left a really great comment a few moments ago that ties in. So I just unmuted you, and I think you just have to accept the unmute, Adrian, to share your comment.
Great. Well, thank you. And hi, Becky. Becky and I are work together at the trauma campaign with CTIP, and so I saw Becky was going to be a speaker and wanted to dial in to see. I know all the great work that she's doing, so keep it up. And Danette, loved hearing your passion and all the great things that are happening. Yeah, in the chat box, I just wanted to share a document that I found, I guess it was a couple weeks ago, and it was around behavioral health co-responder models for police. And, you know, as we are dealing with, you know, racial and social inequities across the country and how we can have different models of policing, I thought it provides some great research and examples of what, you know, communities could encourage their police departments to use. And so anyway, just wanted to share that. And I think obviously there's a lot of great work out there. And Handle with Care really provide, I know Becky is a great advocate for that as well. But that really opened up a lot of great conversations over the past couple of years. And I feel like, right, it takes all of us to do this work. And so now we're piloting some of these co-responder models. So anyway, happy to share, and thank you for your effort to organize all these passionate people doing great work. So thank you.
Thanks, Adrienne. I'm going to call on Josh next to share your comment. So I'm going to unmute you.
Yeah, hi. So I guess it really, for me, just understanding ACEs, understanding trauma-informed care in general is just important. For me specifically, because I just finished my master's program to become a school counselor in Massachusetts. Currently working as a school liaison, but just getting a better understanding of sort of what impacts like the students and families that I worked with, or I will work with and currently am working with, is really important, because it's just one of those things where every student, every family's needs will be different. So kind of getting that understanding of what's really impacting them and how I can use that information to best serve them is really what matters for me. Whether it's, you know, a student has gone through some really, you know, dark times and they just need help with, you know, I don't know, post-secondary planning is something that's really important for me. So yeah, I don't know, it's a lot, but it's important.
Let's say one thing about tying this into the idea of a beloved community. Becky, I know because I've seen the pictures of this, creates these little beloved communities in lots of places. In schools where there are corners where a child can go and regroup, and people talking about the Handle with Care law. And next Friday, Becky and I are going to go into depth on the Handle with Care law. But Becky, talk about that, how any little place can be a place for that. Wait, you need to unmute. Sorry.
Okay. Okay. One of the things to me that I feel has been overlooked, and the ACE movement is bringing, and even in the healthcare system that I worked in, I think a lot of the focus was, when people began to be aware of trauma, was the urgent need for clinical. And yes, clinical is important, but in my trainings, I often talk about trauma-informed care on like a funnel. And the top part of the funnel, to your question, Josh, are where you have a trauma-sensitive school. So now as kids are going to come back, or they're going to do remote learning, that teachers are aware. They don't need a white paper for them to know that the kids' life outside of school matters. Those teachers, when we began to hand them the lens of trauma informed, they're like, what? Yeah, we knew that really mattered, you know? And so many times teachers, they've not been trained, and they feel the behavior is willful instead of survival. And when we begin to hand them the trauma-informed lens and help them to see that kids need to learn emotional regulation, that schools need to have a predictable schedule, signal for transitioning. We've got schools here that have a peace path out on the playground. So the upper part of the funnel is how your community environment. If I ever do a TED Talk, it will be upon the little things. There's a wonderful book by some doctors at the Cooper Institute called Compassionomics, and they did a systematic review of over 1,000 studies and found out in every single one that the compassion of the health system made a difference in the improvement of the health of those they served and helped reduce the burnout. And one of the chapters is about suicide, and some of the doctors were able to get a hold of notes that were left behind tragically by folks who ended their life by suicide. And one man, in his note on the way to the bridge where he ended his life by jumping, he said in his note, if on the way to the bridge one person smiles at me, I won't jump. And so often in the trainings that I do, I talk about the top part of the funnel and about community resiliency. And what about, could you have been the one person that day that could have offered that smile? And then the middle part is that when I worked with the felony offenders in the prison population, I was called by the newspaper Hug a Thug. I proudly wear that title, because when I was talking that we needed more services and there are so many barriers, and talk about trauma, it's not an excuse for drugs or crime, but now it brought us an explanation. But I began to see that people overwhelmed with trauma in their life, they need the middle level of the funnel. They need some warm hand holding. We need mentors. We need case management. We need, in a police department, a social worker that rides along on those calls for homeless services, because rather than another trip to jail where we criminalize homelessness or mental illness, we need to connect to services. And a lot of times, my husband and I are educated, our boys are grown and married, but filing a dental claim is enough you need somebody to run your household. And sometimes when your life is overwhelmed with trauma, you need that middle level. And then the bottom level of the funnel is the clinical. So Josh, you've got a gold mine of opportunity there in your school to make a difference. I feel like 60% of the trauma can be reduced in our communities by these upper two levels. If I could tell one more story fast, Carrie. The other night on the CBS News was a woman back in the school year, a bus driver in rural Utah, and she drove this bus, loved the kids. One day she noticed a little girl with cute braids, and every day she's on the bus, those braids. But into the months of the school year, the little girl's missing. And she noticed she's missing the next day, missing the next day. Finally, she's missing a week. The next week, the little girl's on the bus, but she noticed doesn't have her hair braided. And so the bus driver waits a few days, but noticed the little girl still, no braids. So one day she said, honey, I'm so glad you're back. I miss your braids. And the little girl said, my mommy died last week and my daddy doesn't know how to braid hair. And that bus driver went to the Walmart, got a clean brush and a bag of bows and started brushing the little girl's hair. And the teacher said that brought more spunk back in that little girl. So much so they told the principal, who told the superintendent, who told the local news, and it made our national news. And what I love about this community, and if we ever needed it, we need it now, is that the kindness come back into our communities.
And we need to remember that as we go out into the world and we encounter people who are grumpy. That mom may have just had a bad day, and more than even the kids need a hug, sometimes the mom is the one who needs the hug. And that's why I love Danette and Becky. Y'all look at the family, because if the mama's not happy, nobody's happy. And a lot of parents miss being parented. So in a beloved community, I think we look at that and make allowances. So there have been some other questions. Allison, do you want to maybe?
Yeah, I'm going to unmute Rowena. Go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, Becky and Danette and Carrie. Thank you so much for all that you've shared. I love doing trauma-informed care work and doing sharing about ACEs with folks in the Duke Children's Primary Care. I want to find out, what have you found to be effective? I feel like it's a big question in the sense of helping make systematic change.
Thank you.
Me, did she say? Okay, good question, Rowena. And I had never heard the word system of care when I started this work in 2015, but my work at the police department, I had an $800,000 crime reduction grant, and the grant required that I reduce crime in 4 areas, and each approach had to be a community collaborative approach. And so we ended up with 19 programs, 35 agencies did together, and we won 2 national awards, including the National Criminal Justice Award. Our community came alive. I was just the band director, but you should have heard the band. And so that was really a springboard for the work in Johnson City. Every month I had a meeting with housing authority, libraries, community gardens, healthcare, probation and parole, mental health. So we already had everybody in the room. And when I began just telling them I was learning about ACEs one by one by one, they wanted to receive the training. And the thing that I could have never imagined would have happened was what happened when we gave them the trauma lens. And we have everything from St. Jude's Research Clinic, where they teach life skills to little kids that have been doing chemo for 2 years and now ready to go to school and never had any daycare or preschool. They take them down to the lunchroom and help them see how you order lunch, and well, pre-COVID, but all the inspiring things that our community did. So 2 summers ago, I was asked to speak for the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation to train all the statewide sexual assault center directors, and they wanted me to talk about multidisciplinary teams. So a lot of the work, back to something I said earlier today, was that many of our families are shared, the same agencies share the same family working with them. And so I began to talk at the TBI event about why, we need to, if you make a referral and someone's homeless, then our homeless services need to understand, or our schools need to understand. And so what we found was, after we did the training, we got everybody back together every other month, and we have meetings, what we call system of care. And those have been going on over 4 years now in several cities here. And we just come together and we talk about celebrate our victories together and have continuing education. And we're still casting the net wider. We're just now drawing in United Way, our chambers. And when we come to meetings, we ask folks to bring a list if there's somebody not at the table, and how can we reach them. So I hope that helps.
And thank you. Did that help, Rowena?
She's muted.
I know Danette would like to introduce one of the community managers that she works with, Dr. Renee Starr, who's with her, who was working with her, and I met in Greensboro. When I drove to Greensboro, North Carolina one day for a little presentation. And so, Danette, if you would like to introduce.
There's some people here from Oklahoma too. Yeah, actually, no, she is a community manager for Greensboro because she went to college in Greensboro, but she's living in Oklahoma City. The reason I wanted to introduce you, Dr. Renee Starr was not always a doctor, a PhD. She was one of our program participants back in the 1990s and early 2000s. She just so happened to be here to go with me to a mom's service tomorrow. But her mother had a challenge and was incarcerated for several years. Her mother tried to kill her father. And so this is a young lady that, when we talk about ACEs and what can we do, her brothers were both incarcerated, raised by her father and paternal grandmother, and lost her hearing
at age 15.
At age 15, lost her hearing, and has had 2 cochlear implants since then. Graduated from college, magna cum laude, got her master's degree, went on to get her PhD, now on faculty at Langston University in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. But when we talk about how can we do it, we listen to the young people, is what I stated earlier. When we talk about systems integration, in order to promote systems change, you got to look at how you can integrate the systems. So Becky talked about a systems of care approach. Absolutely, agree 1000%. But during the time that she was in high school and college, she worked with other young people to help them overcome the trauma that they were experiencing. We did a lot of peer work. Becky talked about juvenile justice. All of these citations you see in here from the Atlanta Public Schools and the Washington Post and all of that was from work with juvenile justice. And what we did was we listened to the young people. They told us the cries that was happening in their household. And we put programs around what they needed. And we stayed with them. Not because of $1, because I had to turn my check back over into the organization. But it was because of a passion. So again, I say we have to look at the passion of peace. And Carrie, if you could give some of these people my address, email address, and phone number. I think we're wrapping it up shortly, but I would like to reach out to some of them. I've tried to answer them in the chat box. Those of you, let me just say this in closing. Families need people that want to be there to support them. They're not looking for people that are there because it's their job. And it's good if it's your job and you want to be there. That's good. That's real good. But the most important thing is, can you go the distance? These children have been rejected and abandoned by parents and people that were caregivers or in school districts and so forth. The last thing they need is for another entity to come into their lives and abandon them again. The reason I pulled out of direct services in 2015 with young people was because as I age, see my beautiful gray hair, as I age, I realized that I could not go the distance for the 12 years or the 15 years or the 22 years. She's been with me for 22 years, started at the age of 12. I knew I probably didn't have that many days to go that distance again. So I pulled out, I still serve, but now more so of mentoring other agencies and people that can come on and effectively do some of the same work. So I'm open to share with anybody on the call. I want to just say to all of you, because you're here, oh, what a beautiful place this can be, this world can be. You can do phenomenal things. And I'm willing to lock arms with you if you need support, if you want encouragement or whatever. I'm willing to lock arms with you. I can share with you some of the errors that we made. Most of the times when I facilitate a session, I talk about all the problems I incurred. Because if there was a mistake, I made it. I made a lot of mistakes along the way.
Well,
So thank you, Carrie.
Well, Danette, thank you so much. And I want people to know this was a real effort for you. I mean, not an effort for you. You love to do it. You wanted to do it. But Danette's mom passed away about 3 weeks ago. And one of the memorial services for her mother is tomorrow. And so I just really appreciate you and Starr being there for that. Becky, always thank you so much for being with us. And I'll turn it over to Allison to close us out.
Yeah, Becky, did you have any words to say in conclusion?
Well, can you put, I have a website, beckyhaas.com. So put the email in there. It's becky@beckyhaas.com. And I opened the same invitation that Danette did. I was honored to be asked to join the national campaign in April. And so launched out next week on Thursday. I'm training all the childcare leadership in the state of Mississippi online. And then in our call with Carrie, another Better Normal that we're going to be on, the Tennessee Police Chiefs Association. Kim Wallace is on the call here. I'm going to be helping train the police in the state of Tennessee as we launch Handle with Care statewide. So I kind of feel like my story is like an acorn my grandchildren found the other day for me, and just this little nut beside the road, and I got planted and helped to begin to be a tree, and now I believe I'm at the forest stage. So like Danette, any way that we can help from lessons learned, mistakes made, I'm happy to. And an honor to be here and an honor to be part of this. Thank you, Carrie.
You are so welcome. And Renee Starr, I'm so glad to see you. And we will be talking about Greensboro, girl. Okay.
Carrie, could you please let everyone know about your A Better Normal a week from today?
Yes, on the 31st of July, Becky Haas and I will be doing A Better Normal about working with police officers, police organizations, law enforcement organizations to help law enforcement organizations become trauma informed. We will have with us Dr. Renee Wilson
Simmons,
Wilson Simmons, who is an incredible lifetime achievement of doing the work to help children and families, and has an incredible model in Memphis of what is it, a UPP, Universal
Parenting places.
where a parent who is having an issue, any kind of problem, can go and no judgment, be supported. And then also with us will be Maggie Duncan, thank you, who is the executive director of the Tennessee Association of Police Chiefs. And so these three women are going to talk to us about this nexus of the police, what's going on with the protests for Black Lives Matter, and what we can do to include and encourage police officers and communities to come together and work together to become more trauma informed throughout all the systems. I hope I put that correctly and well.
Good job.
Yes, so look for that announcement on ACES Connection, and please register for that and involve your group.
Everyone who is registered today for this one is also registered for.
That's right. Pardon me.
No worries. So you all can use the very same link that you used to join today's webinar. You can use that link to join on Friday, and we hope to see you back. And also, we hope that you will share. If you love this one, we hope you'll let your friends, family members, and colleagues know about the one on Friday. And thank you so much for spreading the word so that we can create a trauma-informed society together. Carrie, thank you so much for bringing these wonderful guests. Danette and Becky, you both were so amazing and inspiring. I just feel so honored to have gotten to facilitate this today and to learn so much from both of you. I can tell by a lot of the nods, the claps, that everyone here agrees. So maybe we want to do a little silent clap at home. Thank you all so much for showing up today. And for those of you who have showed up 11 times, 15 times, or if this was your first one, we will be sending out an email with our program for the coming week. I think it's going to go out today. So hopefully you will hear about that. Otherwise, you can go to our website, acesconnection.com. And if you scroll down a little bit on the right-hand side, then we have our program there. We typically put the program for the following week up on Fridays. That's today. So you can sign up for next week's events starting here shortly. And so we cannot wait to see you again. Becky, I will see you in a week. And I hope you all have a great Friday and a great weekend.
Thank you, Danette.
Thank you.
Thank you, Allison, so much.